Hello, Mimi. Hi, Ellie. Hi, Ice Sky. Okay, thank you. That's amazing timing. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I am going to get going. Because it's live streamed, people can catch up afterwards if they miss the beginning. So I think it just leaves a bit more time also at the end if we get going. So yes, a big warm welcome. My name's Sofia, and I'm going to use a case study of a community I've built to explore how we design trust in immersive learning environments. To help people better follow the presentation, especially for any image loading issues for anyone, I will include the slide description like this. I will not read out the line that has the flower bullet. They're just markers to help you and me see where we are. So here's what we'll cover today. A brief introduction to myself and my background. The origin story of the Coffee and Coworking community. We'll look at definitions, what I mean by designing trust and immersive learning. I'll introduce a framework for mapping socio-tech infrastructure to stages of participation. And then I'll wrap together how trust technology and community building work together. About me, Sofia Sakura. I'm a social ecosystems designer. I have a master's in an engineering discipline, but my true calling has always been centered on people and how we solve problems together through community. You could call this, rather than the engineering of inert systems, the engineering of living systems, because people and society are not inert matter. They are living systems. The work of Francisco Varela and Umberto Maturana has been very formative for me in that respect. It's helped me understand and see a community as a living social organism, and it's helped me to make a lot of breakthroughs in my work. Some of the things I've done are, I built a pattern language for conflict resolution in communities. I created a system for job creation in communities with multiple levels of deprivation, for which I run multiple awards. And I've coached people who have made massive impacts in the world, helping them find their place in this system of life we're all part of. At this stage, I would like to thank Evangineer for being here. He's a participant and a moderator in the community, but he and I are also having a lot of conversations about aspects of technology. So I invited him to be here, and I'm very happy that he has finally joined Second Life and comes to our co-working sessions after hearing about Second Life for only 19 years from me. So welcome to Second Life, Evangineer. So when I first joined Second Life back in 2006, my aim was to explore online collaboration. I came with my peers and we did just that, but they soon left, and after, my real life got very busy, and for a long while Second Life mainly served as a respite from intense real-world work like conflict resolution in communities. So for a long time, I kept mostly to myself here, me and over 40 kitty cats. In 2020, the pandemic abruptly put an end to my community work in the physical world. By 2023, I realized I was lonely. So I resolved to be more proactive in Second Life and reach out to people. I love cafes and conversation, but I did have to work. So I had the idea to work from a different cafe every day. So many cafes were empty, and they're they're very beautiful cafes. I really want to emphasize. I thought that by sitting there, I might bring them a little bit of traffic. It would help me meet people, and I'd still get my work done. So I gave up my home, put all my cats in storage, and began a new second life. I started small. It was just me and sometimes one cat, a different cafe every day. Gradually, friends began to join, and then more people came, and a group naturally formed. And this is where it all began in May 2023. So fast forward to now, Coffee Coworking is a thriving community. We gather with each other across the grid. And we get inspiration by the diversity of beautiful cafes in Second Life. I will describe the Coffee and Co-working community shortly and then introduce a framework to better understand it, and actually any community by. But first, let me address the key definitions. What do I mean by trust, immersive learning, and design? So by trust, I could equally have focused on care, since this community emerged because I care deeply about people who are isolated and hungry for genuine connection, like I was. And still am. Technology hasn't necessarily delivered on the promise of connection. Many people feel more alienated than ever. With the rapid emergence of AI, trust has become critical, creating an enormous gap between what technology promises and people's willingness to adopt it. So how do we create trust with technology? How do we work through ethical issues together? I believe we create trust through integrity, which emerges from behaviors such as transparency, follow-through, and healthy governance. This creates the conditions for effective collective decision-making, and this can help us unearth and address issues such as data sovereignty. And what do I mean by immersive? Well, given that we're in a 3D world, I've been intentional about using tools that leverage the beauty of the 3D space. I create in-world artifacts so people can remain within Second Life, if possible, rather than stepping outside it, benefiting from immersive affordances. You can see a few examples here, which I'll delve into later. And what do I mean by learning? Well, on the vertical axis, there's formal learning, structured courses, and informal learning, which happens through observation and experimentation. But there's another useful axis, content type. This horizontal axis has domain-specific learning at one end, which in our case with Coffee and Co-working, the domain-specific learning involves co-working skills and how different cafes work. And at the other side of the axis, equally vital, is meta-learning about how to nurture community itself and how to be in community, what I call interbeing. These community-building meta-skills are not always taught in society, at least not in the West, and even if they are, it's not often from a living systems perspective. Yet they're central to how I've designed the community. Because just like a cell is a living system, a community is a living social organism. A living social system, and it's actually a social organism. If people aren't aware of that, they won't be present to this extra layer of learning that's going to accompany the domain knowledge at every level. And if so, they won't put in place the structures to ensure that the community develops in parallel to the activity that they're doing together. So be aware, because whenever I mention learning, I will be referring to these two layers. So what do I mean by design? Well, this is the socio-tech ecosystem I will share with you that is rooted in collaboration and care. In my time in Second Life and also in real life, I've seen many people feel despondent after starting a community that didn't take off, or a venue that stayed empty. And I saw many communities implode, and I honestly felt sad because I know how heartbreaking it can be. This is my vocation, and I really wanted to help, but after my isolated years in Second Life, I didn't want to make any claims until I'd built a community here. So 3 years in, and a vibrant community later that I can truly call home, I sat down and distilled my understanding and experience of what has worked into a framework that people can apply to their own community to increase the level and quality of participation. So I'm delighted to introduce a framework for participation in communities. This will be helpful for your own community building. This framework captures the evolution of participation in a community, how a community can develop along a spectrum. I'll show you how you can recognize where you are within it. And the question marks represent what you can do at each stage to increase both participation and the quality of participation in your communities. Along the x-axis, we have stages of participation as they evolve with time. The y-axis represents extent of participation. The first stage is that of a student. Stage 2 is what I call a tentative participant. And I say student, by the way, because at that point people are just gaining information. They're in an informal kind of learning. Stage 2 is what I call a tentative participant. The third stage, a confident participant. The fourth stage, a committed participant. And the fifth stage, a steward. You can see that there's a shift from observation to active participation to more commitment and ultimately to stewardship. Stewardship is a word we use in community building for leadership. Co-stewarding being shared leadership. Stewarding a community implies a nurturing custodial approach to leadership rather than an authoritative or ownership-based one. You can look at this both at an individual level and as a community as a whole. Coffee and Coworking, as I see it, is currently between stage 3 and 4. Some people have stepped into high levels of commitment, but not everyone. The point to mapping the stages like this is to ensure that you have optimized your socio-tech infrastructure to best support and enable those transitions. And also that you do it in a way that delivers on your purpose and the implicit promise of that at every stage. This is a lot, but you do not need to do it all in one go. Deliberate design and then organic application is the key. There will be a healthy pace at which you can do it. Let me first introduce you to Coffee and Coworking, and I will come back to this diagram. So what is Coffee and Coworking? Coffee and Coworking is a way for people to meet and work on their own thing with the company of others. Body doubling, a term from the ADHD world, describes the calming and regulating experience of simulating proximity through on-screen presence of another person or avatar. Essentially, the presence of other humans help. It can motivate people to get things done. Sometimes it's more fun together, and there's coffee. I go into all of this in a lot more detail in the All About Coffee and Coworking note card when you click the pink poster, if you would like that. So who are we? We are a community of 180 people in our Second Life group with another 100 Discord server members, a good number of which overlap. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of some of the co-working community here in the audience today. Lovely to see you all. And thank you for coming. Sessions posted in the Second Life group sessions that are posted in the Second Life group chat sync via a bot to Discord and vice versa, so Discord members don't need to be online at a particular moment to learn about sessions. I'm going to come back to that bigger diagram, but meanwhile, our community comprises 3 key roles: cafe goers, cafe owners, and session hosts, all from diverse backgrounds and time zones. The roles can overlap. A person can be all 3. What they have in common are needs and desires to combine both conversational and silent companionship to assist them in focusing, sometimes as a refreshing break from work, a bit like being around a water cooler, or as a way to get down to work itself. It's important to remember that these are real human beings sitting behind a screen somewhere who have to get work done and can benefit from sitting with others, editing that document, reading, catching up on comms, or just taking a moment in a calming ambience with others. Okay, back to the diagram of the community. We curate a partially rotating list of up to 50 cafes that we recommend for co-working. Cafe owners who are part of our community and are drawn to our purpose can apply to be member cafes who we prioritise in our venue choices and who remain on our recommended list. Impromptu co-workings can be initiated by any member. Regular scheduled sessions are run by cafe owners who've stepped up their commitments to the community or session hosts. We're launching our first community day in April for deeper involvement and are in the process of designing our first training for session hosts as a way to support other members. I've developed several tools to support participation for each role, but before I share these tools, I want to ground them in the words of our community itself. What people have said about coffee and co-working. The greatest thing about this group is how laid back and nice everyone is. Well, that plus coffee, even just the thought of coffee, is enough to make me happy. Thank you so much for all you do with C&C. It's such a great group of people. You've inspired us all and built such a warm and inviting community. What these quotes tell me is that the design work is translating into lived experience. And a principle that has guided me in achieving this is, when people show up to your community, can they see 2 things clearly? The outer game, which means what happens that's visibly easy to see on the surface. And the inner game, how do you actually thrive here? How easy is it to participate? How do you discover the social codes? How much is explicit rather than implicit? Most humans want to know how to succeed in a system. We have so many examples in society where the path to success is unclear or even deliberately obfuscated. So I asked myself, how could I create a different experience? The aim became to codify what it takes to do well and make that explicit, and then socialize that learning through the community. Some people find themselves on the sidelines and others dive in with confidence. What infrastructure can move people from shy to confident in ways that are comfortable and uplifting? Let me show you how I've applied this for coffee and co-working. And I also just want to say, and this is extra, that everything is a work in progress and everything is an experiment as we go along with the community. And I can't always share everything that's happening with the community because in the nicest words, not everyone's always interested. So that's a balancing point that you always need to think about. And it often amuses me. I think I often share too much, but then, this is something that I think you can only see in time as you go along. So here's a timeline that highlights the socio-tech infrastructure that has helped us at each stage. I'm going to touch on the highlights so you can ground the developments in time. In May 2023, I held co-working sessions at different cafes. I soon created my own cafe and shortly after formed a group so that people who wanted could join me. I'm going to jump over to this slide briefly. I developed the Where is Coffee and Co-working HUD. You can see their little HUD on screen in both images. When people click on it, it makes an HTTP call to a Google spreadsheet. The user sees the next scheduled session printed privately to them in local chat. It's a neat and convenient way to always see when the next scheduled session is. Initially, I updated that spreadsheet daily manually. Back to the timeline. By the way, if anyone wants any of the scripts I mentioned, please reach out to me and I will get them to you. In December 2023, after 7 months of hosting daily sessions and 70 unique cafe visits, real-life work meant I couldn't host daily any longer. I let the community know, which actually felt very hard, but I created a Discord server with bidirectional sync so that Discord members don't need to be online at a particular moment to learn about sessions. I emphasized how anyone could host a co-working, and I encouraged people to. In May 2024, I wrote an open letter to cafe owners, helping them understand what to realistically expect when they asked for their cafe to be on the recommended list, and framing the whole as greater than the sum of the parts. In November 2024, I noticed sessions had different atmospheres, some quiet, some social. This was a potential source of confusion and reflected the challenge of interbeing. How do we communicate our often changing needs and offers? I identified 3 key session types: lounge, quiet, and sprint, with clear terminology for each, giving people both an ontology and explicit permission for different working styles. I put this into a HUD called the cheat sheet, a friendly slideshow accessible within Second Life that teaches not just how sessions work, but the ethos that helps people enjoy the experience. Back to the timeline. In May 2025, the first set of moderators emerged, 6 covering all time zones, trusted individuals with a variety of capacity and long-term understanding of Second Life. This was a quiet game changer for me and a real milestone, a felt sense of something that had gone beyond me. I wanted to host more sessions again, but there was a new point of friction. At times, I was so busy, I couldn't promise the normally expected level of friendliness and presence. Because people wouldn't get the normal social cues that you could give in this physical world, I realized I needed a way to mimic that. i.e., to signal the often changing quality of presence in world without words. That can bring a high level of fluidity to the signaling. Within a session, your presence can shift many times between focused work, partial availability, and collegial presence. Of course, you can update your status in chat, but there are times when you might not wish to do that, especially for moment-by-moment changes. It's very useful to signal when in deeper focus, because conversation at that point can mean context switching, which can be difficult and costly to your creative process or hard-earned focus. I thought of a traffic light system above my head so people could see it, and that would signal my state without the need for words. It had been years that I'd wanted to find an AFK HUD that could do all of this for co-working, but I never found one that felt quite right. Now, with the advent of vibe coding, I finally created one. Let me show you how it works. I'll put on the HUD so you can see it in action. You see above my head. If I'm in a session, I can indicate my presence and my availability. When I have the green on, I'm fully present and engaged. Yellow means I'm away from the keyboard. Purple indicates I'm in deep focus mode or ghost mode. This is less about do not disturb and more about what someone can expect from me. Thank you, Buffy. Thank you. This goes to the heart of my signaling need, clarity about my presence. In a quiet co-working session, I'll often have the purple mode on. And you can see that actually in the top picture there. You might vaguely see there's a purple disc above my head in the co-working session up the top of the relic. We also have a timer system for sprint sessions. That's the pink mode. During the sprint sessions, an extra disc appears that changes colour between purple, work time, and green, break time, in sync with the pink timer. The timer countdown is above the extra disc, so everyone can see when the next break is coming or when work time resumes. Once the Pomodoro timer is fully developed and tested, it will become available to our entire community. If you're interested in trying it once it's ready, just let me know and I'll contact you when the time comes. Back to the timeline. After a wonderful month of co-writing sessions in November 2025, in December, some members stepped forward to run the first member-led regular sessions. I sensed a genuine buzz around the community, and a manifesto emerged reflecting what we actually are and our shared values. It went down very well with the community. There it is in front of the relic in the reading room. I won't read it out as it's in the co-working kit you can get afterwards from the pink poster should you like to. I'll just say that the community really love it, and some have put posters of it in their cafes. Back to the timeline. We instigated an automated poster system ensuring consistent messaging wherever newcomers encountered our posters. That was in late 2025. Previously, it had been enormous work to keep every cafe's note card updated. Yeah, thank you, Em. This accompanied the formalizing of member cafes, those that feel aligned with our manifesto and have one of our posters at their cafe. The cafes are themselves beloved members of our community. And you can see a poster there at the Dancing Rabbit. And just one extra point, that the physical environment and cafes really are the kind of third participant in all of this. They're ever present and they really set the tone of sessions. So there's a deep gratitude to people who make these venues. We also built a series of automation tools to help people locate sessions and support member cafes with heavy lifting around notification. And remember that whereas Coffee and Coworking had, it now updates automatically and dynamically from our online calendar 15 minutes after a scheduled session finishes. That's a huge relief, as I found it very difficult to remember manually to update that spreadsheet every time I left a session. I'd actually often wake up at 2 in the morning thinking, oh no! This automation was done through vibe coding using a Google Apps script. And most recently, a group joiner tracking system enabling us to personally welcome new joiners in the Second Life group. It tracks who's joined the group since I last ran the script. It was another vibe code script which involved exporting the members list to my local machine into Excel, running a macro and seeing who's joined, and then I can personally onboard them. And I'm thrilled about that. And looking to the future, we have announced our first Coffee and Coworking Community Day for April, an opportunity for people to get more involved behind the scenes. And the role of hosting is becoming formally recognised with training and support structures that we are introducing soon. And behind the scenes, we're also exploring sovereign technology, moving beyond centralised systems like Discord towards infrastructure that respects data privacy and community autonomy. And this is just an ad here. I'm doing that mainly with Evangineer. Evangineer's background is highly technical and into decentralized systems. So there's the idea that we could one day replace Discord. And I think it's not too far in the future that it could be a decentralized version. So that's going on too. And of course, as more people get involved behind the scenes, more of this will be shared as we go along with the community building. So we're going to go now and actually use the participation framework. I'll walk you through how the infrastructure that we gradually put in place maps to the participation stages. I'll show you how this works in Coffee and Coworking, and then show you how to apply this framework to your own community. As you can see, there are a set of guiding questions on the left. What is the action we want people to take? What is their need at that stage? And this is, by the way, we step through these questions for each role and for each stage. So the roles we have here are the cafe owners at the top, which are the little sloth creatures offering coffee because they're very relaxed. And the cafe goers are the coffee beans. You can see the coffee bean icon. And the session hosts are the axolotl in a teacup, also very relaxed. For each role, we'll separately step through the questions. So this will help you to identify what to do at each stage for that role to support transitions along the stages in a way that delivers on your purpose and on your promise. So I was stepping through the questions there. What action do we want them to take for a specific role at each stage? What is the need of that role at that point? What experience do we want them to have? What's the learning that's involved at that stage that we want to support them through? And what tech can we use to do that? This works as a generic framework that you can apply to each of your key roles for each of your stages. Before we go to see how we apply this for Coffee and Coworking, I want to draw your attention to the fourth question, learning. If you remember, there will be two types of learning going on in your community. In addition to the domain learning in the left-hand column, there's also the community layer of learning. So for each stage and each role, we will always have two answers to the question about what is it we want them to learn at that point. For example, for a mesh building community, the domain-specific question might be how to find out about mesh classes. And that's at the student stage, yeah? And then the community building question could be understanding that there's a caring code of conduct. So, looking at how we applied the framework to Coffee and Coworking, due to limited time, I'm going to go through the first two stages for one of the three key roles for our cafe goers, represented by the coffee bean and the lady sipping coffee. So the first stage is the student. In our case, students are what we call possible participants. They've discovered our community and might stick around. They might attend co-working sessions. What action do we want them to take? So at this stage, we want them to learn about us. What is their need? Well, they need clarity. They need to make an informed choice about whether this is for them. What experience do we want them to have of that? Well, we want it to be gently inviting and light-hearted. The learning is informal and hopefully inspired by their curiosity and our engaging materials. So what specifically do we want them to learn? Well, in relation to Coffee and Coworking at this stage, it's the basics, the 5 W's as I call them, the who, the what, the when, where and why in relation to this community. But as we mentioned before, there's also another type of learning happening. At the student stage, the generic question at this layer for the community building layer is how to recognize community itself. You want to show aspects of the community that are there in a language that meets people where they are in their experience of community. People might have had bad experiences at a personal level. They might think they can't function in communities. People might recognize that there is something good happening, but not really be able to articulate why. Many people have little lived experience of real wholesome community in a world of individualism and social media where these skills are not often trained. So through careful and caring framing, you're offering the possibility of a positive experience for them as an individual. That might be the first time in a long time. And you're helping them to learn what makes it good and you're recalibrating their expectation of what is possible for all of us with a healthy community by connecting them with the deep imprints that I do believe that we all have inside, even if forgotten for a long time. So at this stage, at the student stage, the question around the community layer of what we want them to learn is we want them to visualize the coffee and co-working community, help them recognize the community that is present, make it easy for them. What support can we give them? Well-structured, clear, lively information. For coffee and co-working, for coffee and co-working, our all about coffee and co-working note card is a way to give them a sense of the whole. Our co-working kit has navigation tools. Our manifesto puts a stake in the ground for what they can expect. It helps them make an informed decision. For the question of technology, normally it's very hard to know who's joined your Second Life group. They can remain unnoticed. If they're in the wrong time zone, they may never even see any group notice or group chat. They might have the mistaken experience that the group is dead. The new joiner script means I can welcome people personally. I can make sure they've seen the information, help them see that there is community here and sooner recognize its shape. In this way, I can support their process to decide whether this is for them. So how do you apply this to your community? You'll first need to think about what the key roles are, regardless of what your community does. And then, in answering the questions for each stage, for each key role, you'll be able to help potential members quickly determine whether this is a community for them, and it will help you identify what you need to put in place to help them as they progress through each next stage to the point that they feel they belong, and how you can support each transition so that they remain satisfied and make sure you deliver on your core promise at each stage. And I, again, want to emphasize that this is a lot, but it's not something I think that ever should be done overnight. There's a very natural pace at which this develops, I do think. So for the second stage, the tentative participant, this would be someone who wants to go to a co-working session. They've moved from possible to genuinely wanting to act, but they might feel shy. My goal is to support that first action with confidence. So what action do we want them to take? Well, it's to go to a co-working. What's their need? Confidence. What experience do we want them to have? But when they get there, a reassuring and a welcoming one. What is the body of learning at this stage? Well, there's a practical knowledge about how to use the tools to find the session, and then the community building layer, they are discovering how to be in this community. So we want to make some of that social coding explicit. This way, you level the playing field and expand people's capacity to participate. So what support do we offer in that respect? Well, practical help to get to a session, and then addressing the how to be in this community. Well, we model healthy participation. Our experienced hosts and participants effectively model sessions for newer members. On the technology side, the cheat sheet presents an ontology of session types, helping people understand the language and discover a variety of sessions that could meet their needs. The Where is Coffee and Co-working HUD helps them get to a session. Your artifacts at this stage, the note cards, the HUDs and welcome messages, contain both practical information and elements of this community building layer. You're teaching domain knowledge as well as interbeing skills, as specific to your community. And as people share and discuss these artifacts, they socialize the learning, deepening it for everyone. As you can see, I've mapped the participation stages for our domain at Coffee and Co-working. Time won't allow me to go into full detail of all the stages, and you'll need to do this for your community, and you can do that by answering these same questions for each stage and each role. And you can see at this stage, these are more generic than the questions for Coffee and Co-working because they're a generic set here, but you make them unique to you by applying them. And so yes, that needs to be done for each role and each stage. And I would like to show you another pattern though, and 3 key points that I think will also be useful. The first is about rewarding and supporting the extra responsibility. We've gone down this axis, the left axis, with the questions on the left, but I would also like to go across. So in this visual here, we are looking at the different role, not the student, but not the cafe goer or sorry, let me start again. Not the cafe goer, but the session host. And remember, a person can be both. So this is for the session host, and it's the progression in learning that I'm emphasizing here. So across the stages, we have a student, where people are being informed, the tentative action taker, the confident action taker, where people show up in different ways more often. They may progress to committed action taker, where they regularly off sessions or initiate something new. Either way, stepping into more commitment, and that commitment carries responsibility, and that deserves a level of support. So that's the first point, really to support people who step in with more commitment. Secondly, notice that for the learning question, I've only highlighted the community building layer. You'll need to figure out the learning content specific to your domain. So for role-playing community or mesh building community, there are specific learnings that people will have as they step up their participation levels. But the community building layer is the same for every single role. It's the same general pattern here. The first is about recognizing community. The second, we're helping them to learn to be in community. Then we're helping them to learn to be fully in a community where they feel a certain sense of home there. And then we support them because they'll naturally start to give back. This is just what tends to happen. But we support the learning and how to nurture that community. And then finally, how to step into co-steward. The community building content follows the same generic pattern as any role that progresses through the stages. And one last useful point to be aware of, and that's about stewardship. And as I mentioned, it's a word we use for leadership in communities as it encourages an ethos that helps people to adopt a nurturing custodial role rather than an authoritarian one. I don't have time to step through the questions for the remaining stages in depth, but I want to highlight the final stage, the co-stewarding, where people step in fully with you to shepherd the community together. Substantial infrastructure is needed at this stage, systems for collective governance, decision-making, and so on. I sometimes call this embracing the whole, truly seeing and caring for the community as a unified entity, and you can accomplish remarkable things together at this stage. And there are plenty of examples of it here in Second Life too. So working through these questions in the framework will help you understand how each stage differs. It will help you manage people's expectations and better deliver on the promise of community. And this will build substantial trust. By the way, that's Indigo Sky Press there. One of our lovely regular co-working spots. So coming back to trust has distinct, and welcome Indigo, who's the owner? Coming back to trust has distinct dimensions, particularly when introducing technology. The foundation, as I see it, is DWSSWD. Do what you say and say what you do. At the domain-specific layer, this builds baseline trust. People will see whether you deliver the core things that you promise. In parallel, though, there's the promise of community itself. People want to feel safe and properly governed. There's trust related to being in community together, a sense that as a community you can travel together. And here's the crucial point. If you've truly brought your community along through caringly and deliberately designing progression in participation levels, you'll have the relational foundation to have the difficult conversations you need to have around ethics and technology as a community. So thank you for coming. I genuinely love talking about these topics. This wraps it up for us today. And if you have any questions or comments, please share them now. If you'd like to continue this conversation, please send me an IMO note card, and I always get both. You're warmly welcome to join my group, Dreaming Together Collectively, which is focused on ecosystem design and community building. If you'd like to try co-working, click on the poster to get the co-working kit and instructions for joining either the group or our Discord server. Thank you for listening, and I'll stop now to answer questions. Thank you very much. Oh, and that image there is the Frangipani community cafe.
I have a bunch of questions which you won't have time to answer.
Oh, fantastic, Marley. Yes, fantastic, Marley. In fact, I'm going to...
I got the manifesto, but I don't see the list of questions on it. Is that on a separate note card?
Bear with me. I'm hoping the speech recognition works in my response here. The manifesto, and thank you for everyone's comments, thank you. The manifesto is a separate thing to the set of questions, Marley. So if I can jump to the set of questions, because the set of questions are part of the core framework. I'm going to jump back to the core framework with that first stage. So yes, so here are the set of questions, Marley. On the left-hand side, for each role in your community and each stage, you will need to answer.
I don't see it.
You don't see it. Do you see the screen, the big screen at the moment?
I see stage 1 student.
Okay, so are you able to zoom in? Because on the left-hand side, there is a stacked list of questions on going up the y-axis. And I can read them to you. They are action, question mark.
No, I want, are they written down? Is it something that I can actually...
Oh, brilliant. I see what you're saying. I will make them available to you after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will make the questions available afterwards. Yes, you're so welcome. I'm just responding to comments here. You're very, very welcome, everyone. Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Ava. Great to see you here. And yes, emphasis on careful. Thank you. Yes. So, Marley, if you've got other questions, I'm all ears.
Okay. Is there a group made up of people who are innovators and want to talk about their process?
In relation to community building, do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. The group that I have is a very small group. I've not really been active with it because really this is, I've slowly been stepping into actually documenting these processes and steering this sort of work. But definitely that's a group where it's definitely about talking about group processes. So you're welcome to join that. But otherwise, I mean, if you know of one, do share.
Yeah, in relation to community building. Do the cafes characterize themselves like restaurants with brief descriptions of what their ambience or focus is, so people can figure out which ones they want to go to?
It's a good question. I would say that the cafes, as they're listed, not as such, but people get to know the different cafes and the feeling that the different ones evoke and support. For example, we've got some cafes that really support the community of readers. For example, Zoe's Cafe, the reading room at Segioshire, and Sonder Books, they're very focused around reading. And then we've got other cafes that slightly more emphasize writing. For example, Tinker's cafe, although Tinker's says it's her cafe is really more for creative folk, but because Tinker is a writer herself, that draws, writers. And also Octavius is very much about creativity and writing and poetry, and also Indigo Sky Press, of course. So they start to become known for the community that the cafes themselves gather around themselves. And
it would be helpful, though, because people could weed out the ones that don't interest them. It would save a lot of time to have brief descriptions of each cafe, is what I'm saying.
Yes, that's a good point. Actually, there's the World API, the World API, and actually in our recommended list, a community member suggested that I use that as a link rather than Slow, which actually links to the description, that's the in-world description of the place. So people do get a bit of an overview there. So it's not very consistent, but I like your idea, and I think it's great, and I think it's a very good point to guide people to where. I also want to emphasize that the ambience is also very much set by the host. So the person who chooses to host, first of all, they'll have their own style, and people will come to know their style. And the second of all, they have the choice also of deliberately emphasizing the type of session. As I mentioned, we have lounge sessions, which are kind of like where people are starting to check into work. They need a bit of a break. They need to kind of feel the human in them again. Perhaps they've been working long hours, and they'll step into a lounge session to have a bit of company, but they're still with work hanging over them, but we're coming in solidarity to a lounge session. So it's not quite the same as, say, a coffee group that just meets and would sit around a fireplace and talk about anything and everything. That's beautiful too, but this has a sense that we're all in this kind of need to get some kind of work done together, and so that defines the tone of the sessions too. So whether they're a quiet session, a lounge session, or let's help ourselves be accountable and have work and then focus sessions. So that's very much about the hosts, and it's also about the community learning what's a useful common language together. I can suggest something, but if people don't like that word, they're never going to use it. So in the end, the community will say which words get used, what language actually is alive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reading, I love your questions, Marley, they're so rich. And Ava says, true, the session's atmosphere can vary so much depending on the host, regardless of the physical description of the space. Yes.
I can see applications of this, not just to cafes, but to anybody who's trying to create community around a particular interest. There are a lot of possibilities there.
Yes, I can only agree. A dear friend of mine said, for example, she said, I don't know if, for example, this could be used by a music club. And I thought, well, absolutely yes, because the thing is, as soon as people gather others, they are in the work of community building, kind of whether they want to or not. And the thing is, I always think that the sooner you accept that, the better, because these dynamics are present. And if you don't, the extent to which you don't manage them, they will then manage you. Because we're humans, and we're all trying to get along and do our best, but we all have very different experiences, backgrounds, and when these things meet, you get normal group dynamics. And then when there's confusion, it can bring up all sorts of fissures. And if you have integrated a way of being with each other that people feel trust in, then you're more equipped to handle those different fissures that necessarily will come along.
I think it's interesting too to make a distinction between a community group and a group that is organized around a particular interest, which may not be a community, but where the people, I think whole brain health is an example of that. There are many people there who are devoted to the idea of stimulating the older brain and having interactive activity, but many of the people there don't know each other, but they're devoted to the cause of the place. And I'm willing to bet that there are a lot of places like that in Second Life that are not necessarily communities, even though people share some kind of focus.
Yes, now I think that's a very, very good point, because we actually often talk about the difference between communities of interest, communities of practice, and there are obviously all different kinds of communities. And I love what you're saying, because, for example, there are people in Coffee and Coworking who've never been to a session, who've never communicated in chat, who've never done anything. But I love the fact that they're there, because what I believe is that people will do what they want to do, and when they feel comfortable, they will do what they want to do. And okay, so we soon need to wrap it up. So 5 minutes left and time to wrap it up. So I will do that, Buffy. Yes, but what I will say is that I feel that there's a lot of value in people watching. In we use the word lurking. I'm not so keen on the word lurking. It kind of puts it in a negative light. Some people just get very inspired to see that things are happening, and it might take them 3 years to be able to participate, but in that time they're learning, they're watching, and so the actions of a group of people go a lot beyond who's immediately involved. And I think that's also powerful and important. And so what we're doing, we're modeling, and people are learning indirectly and directly. And whereas it might not be an overt, explicit, invited community, the same dynamics are happening underneath. I do think that either that if you actively, proactively manage them, then you have an effect. But even just being aware that they're there will put you in, I would say, a state of more of a whole systems of awareness, of a capacity to understand why the dynamics are happening. This helps to understand that people do progress through stages. Not everyone, for example, might want to be a host, but they might be, in our group, they might be a participant who's an amazing participant who never hosts a session, but is just, and like an ambassador participant. And so they have evolved. There is an evolution that's happening. And even someone who lurks, so to speak, they might be a very professional lurker that actually brings a lot. Who's to know, they might spread the word far and wide. So yes, I think I'm saying a lot there, so I probably should stop. But I thank you, Marley, for the great questions, and thank you for the comments. And people have messaged me as well. I will get back to you all after the session. But yeah, goodness, that's a lot of words. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for coming. I guess I should stop. I feel like I'm just starting, but yes, this is my vocation, and I just well, I will stop there. And thank you very, very much, everyone. Bless your heart, and yeah, just big love to all. And yeah, this is all a work in progress, and may we all learn together. Thank you so much. Just message me if there's any elements you want or need afterwards, anybody, if there are things that are not clear, because yeah, it's a lot. And thank you so much.